Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. That's me, your host on a podcast dedicated to startups, entrepreneurs, founders, and even the angels and VCs and family offices and money people who serve them, or is it vice versa? Sometimes we can't tell. We now also have a companion podcast, The Angel, which is more focused to the money side. Today, I'm very happy to welcome to the show Karl Swanepoel, who is the founder and CEO of Revolancer, which, as he likes to point out to me and others, is a combination of revolution and freelancer. Hi, Karl. Thanks for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, hi Michael. Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, and I want to remind everybody you can find us on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Adobe, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube. You can find us in video format on YouTube and Spotify, where audio and video coexist. So great to have you. Make sure to recommend us and rate us, subscribe to us, and share us. All of those things if you can. So, Karl, I'm very fascinated by this. You're actually coming to us live from Wales in England. Part of the United Kingdom, right? I want to be careful.
Yes, right next to England.
Yes, you are a separate country, now known for the Wrexham soccer team, thanks to Ryan Reynolds. But I wanted to ask you, so describe this revolution in freelancing. We all know about Fiverr and other companies. I get solicited, as I'm sure you do. I'm not exaggerating, probably 25 times a week by somebody with temporary help agencies in Philippines, all over the world. So what is it about what you're doing that's new and different?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, the freelancing revolution is long overdue because these large
Hmm.
platforms, the ones you mentioned, and others as well, have been doing the same thing for the past 15 to 20 years at this point, and they haven't changed. And what they're currently doing is connecting businesses and freelancers and making money by taking a commission. So they take a cut of the transaction. And because of that, they have to be very careful about where you can talk to, the freelancer as the business or vice versa. Because if you could speak outside the platform, you could easily arrange to pay outside of the platform after they've made the connection, and then they don't make revenue. So because of that, you can't video call on these platforms. And now, post-pandemic, video calling is such an essential part of remote work. Personally, I decided that these platforms were out of date 10 years ago, and they haven't changed even today, even now a couple of years after the pandemic. So, like I said, I think it's high time we are doing what we can about it. We have well over 20,000 freelancers on the platform already now. And, we hope to be the revolution that the freelancing market deserves.
And where can people find you? What is your website?
Yeah, so it's revolancer.com, or if you just Google Revolancer, you'll find it.
Okay, so what's interesting about this is 5 years ago, nobody was really using Zoom or anything quite like that. The pandemic came, and the rest is history. You and I have already Zoomed once before this.
Mm-hmm.
We're on the Riverside platform for podcasting, but Zooming is so commonplace. This is probably like, for me, an average day is like, I don't know, 4 or 5 Zooms, maybe more. So it's hard to imagine doing business without it, and yet on these platforms, I was on Fiverr yesterday and actually came across this problem of not, and I don't think they really want you to talk on the phone, do they?
Yeah, you
I mean,
can't.
I get the feeling that's really discouraged. Are you aware of that as well?
Absolutely, it's forbidden. So you can get kicked off of the platform if you try to exchange phone numbers.
Is that right? Oh,
That's
okay.
correct. Yeah,
I
for the
didn't
large
know that.
platforms. Yeah.
Yeah. So this clearly is a place where disruption is called for. But what's your business model? Because you're critical of their model. So what's your model? What's different about how you do it?
Well, we don't charge subscription fees. That means we can allow phone calls, video calls, exchange of details without any issue. And instead, we have an optional monthly subscription plan. So if you want access to additional features, you pay £5 per month.
And if you don't, it's free to the user, free to the freelancer. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. But by paying £5 per month, you can send more sort of proposals to clients. So you have a slightly higher chance of being hired, and it's only £5 per month as opposed to 25%
Sure.
of your earnings.
Yeah. So £5 per month. Give me that in U.S. dollars as of these days.
Probably about six USD or so.
Six. Okay. So not expensive. And is that on purpose? I mean, you probably could have charged a bit more, but I guess freelancers, the Fiverr people, the people on Fiverr, like I literally feel badly for them that they are charging so little. Not in every case, but in many cases, I mean, it just seems like so little money, compared to what the value is. So how do you, is that true of your freelancers? Are your freelancers all over the world, and are they um, kind of desperate for this money in a sense?
Well, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is on Fiverr, they because they take a 25% commission, the prices that you see, well, actually the freelancers are getting a whole bit less than that, at the end of the day as well. We do support. Well, we're an international platform. We operate around the world, and ultimately, our focus is really on quality, but then also empowering freelancers to charge what the work is worth. Because ultimately, as a freelancer, you should determine your pricing based on the value that you provide to the client, not necessarily anything else, to be honest. So we encourage freelancers to do that.
Yeah.
We have kind of a lot of materials teaching them the basics, and yeah.
Well, one thing, 20,000 users, I mean, to me, that's impressive. How long have you been in business?
Yeah, so I've been in business for just over 2 years, but the platform has been live for about 18 months at this point. And a lot of that growth, I mean, our growth is accelerating essentially. So we went from 10 to 20,000 users in just the past few months.
Okay, so that's so in the last couple of months you've actually doubled, which is a good sign. Now, but it strikes me that in this business model, not yours, but just the virtual freelancer business model, the issue to me as a user of these services is that somebody in Kenya,
Mhm.
where I actually have a virtual assistant, somebody in the Philippines, as I mentioned before, aren't they going to be able to charge inherently because cost of living and expenses are less, and maybe their education is less? There are other factors, but aren't they inherently going to be able to charge less than somebody in the United States or the developed world?
But potentially, yes. I think in a lot of cases, the answer to that question is yes. But equally, there are other factors to consider as well, such as time zone differences, such as, I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot of reasons. I mean, we see companies sort of wanting to hire, not locally in the sense of, just in the same kind of city or town, but locally, as in within the same time zone, within the same country, that sort of stuff all the time. And equally, some companies don't. But we find that, and personally, I find as well that the companies that are worth working with are those who pay, are willing to pay for what the service provided is worth, not just trying to find the cheapest possible option. So thankfully,
A,
we do
a
see
living,
a lot of that.
yeah, a living wage, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
So, what kind of skills do the freelancers on Revolancer, what kind of skills do they have? And is there any
So
uniqueness there?
yeah, so it's essentially anything that can be done remotely and benefit a business. So the main four categories are design, web development, media, and marketing. And we have a few others too, but that's sort of the main part of it.
How about Chat GPT, AI?
What do you mean? Sort of
Well,
do
I
it?
think I feel like that. In fact, Fiverr has already made concessions to this. I think they have some categories, but today you can look for an artist who is going to use an open AI type of tool, a generative AI tool, versus an artist that's going to either do it the old-fashioned way by hand or do it online. So, or do it, pardon me, digitally. So, is that a category that's starting to pop up for you?
I'd say not so much in that people are, expressly selling services as ChatGPT or so, but I personally think that ChatGPT, I think it can be a very useful tool for freelancers to kind of make their job more efficient, and not just freelancers. I'd say probably everyone on the planet with some kind of device and an internet connection, I think, can actually, if they think about it for long enough, come up with a useful sort of use case for something like ChatGPT in their life to automate something or just make something more efficient. But I don't see it, at least in the short term, as something that is really viable to fully replace sort of experts. Because ultimately
Yeah.
ChatGPT it's not sort of sentient or thinking. It's essentially just a sort of very advanced predictive text that's been trained on 5 million web pages. So it can choose sequences of words that sound, excellent, like they really fit together. But that doesn't mean that it's always going to be factual. And ultimately, ChatGPT can be very useful if you're getting it to sort of generate something about a topic that you know about that you can then sort of audit and make adjustments. But it can be quite dangerous if you're getting it to write about something that you don't know about, because it writes very convincingly, and then you're just going to accept that as fact, and that's it's a risk.
Yeah, no, I think you summarized that really really well and accurately. It's going to be a tool like any other. Unlike most tools, you go if you're going to use it, you're going to go into it knowing it makes mistakes. Like,
Yeah.
can you think of any other tool that like inherently makes mistakes? You know, like like a scissors just cuts paper unless you screw up, right? But if you had a if Jachi, I don't know, I just came up with this analogy, but you get my point.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's an inherent problem. Now, everyone out there in Accelerator land, the listeners of
Mhm.
this podcast, want to know why you, Carl, have gotten so committed to this. Why are you doing this? What's why the revolution? Why are you the Lenin of this movement?
Well, when I was 13, I decided that I wanted to be my own boss. I then, immediately tried to
Hmm.
figure out how can I actually sustain myself. Tried to make money online, found sort of freelancing platforms, like that are the big platforms that are still around today. I started freelancing on there. Um, and and quite quickly realized that these platforms were just out of date and not really serving freelancers. And this was back, about 10 years ago. So then I
So
built my own free.
how old were you then? You're not. Pardon me for interrupting, but how old were you then?
I was 13 then. I'm 23 now.
So right, you mentioned that. So why when you were 13, did you have a bad experience with the boss? Did anything happen that kind of spurred this?
I've never had a normal job. I certainly didn't when I was 13. So
Uh-huh.
no, I have no idea where it came from, but it was just my intuition, and it
You felt it
very
right
much
away.
proved
So
correct.
for 10 years you've felt this. Now you're 20, only 23, so you're ridiculously young. Um, and but what there's something going on inside of you, I think, that says like you must feel like a great sense of I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a certain amount of feeling of injustice about this. That there's something like really systemically wrong, not just with freelancers, but with economics essentially, right? Because isn't Fiverr just you could argue it's just capitalism at work. It's just like the marketplace. It's a marketplace, right? People competing for work, and when you have that, it tends to drive the price down. Is that something that you get passionate about, or
It
is that just a
absolutely
byproduct?
is. And I mean, I think you can argue, of course, that it's sort of it's the free market, but I think also the platform plays a role in facilitating a certain kind of environment. And if the platform is taking 25% of the sort of the freelancer's earnings, right, and they're stopping you from communicating properly with the freelancer, one, how can you
Right.
expect to get value for money as a business? And two, how can you expect to have a satisfactory experience with the freelancer if you can't even communicate with them properly and explain what it is you want or figure out if they're the right person to work with? So, yes, a free market, sure, but at the same time, I think that the way things are set up is not only unfair to freelancers, but actually bad for clients as well.
Why is that?
Well, because you are, a whole chunk of the money that you're paying the freelancer is not going to the freelancer. So, you are essentially getting
But
less already than what you paid for.
couldn't you say the same about Apple Store? I mean, maybe you would. It's like a 70-30 split. They're taking, in most cases, 30%, which is even more than
It is,
the
but sure, but in that case, it's a software based product, so there isn't sort of effort or manual labor involved in each sale. So there you can essentially price it at whatever, take whatever commission you want. But here, in the case of freelancing, you're essentially paying someone for their time or to provide a certain service. So there has to be, that their kind of input there. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so first of all, that how can you expect value for money as a client if a huge chunk of it is actually not going to the person you're hiring? And then secondly, how can you evaluate them if you can't video call? How can you effectively communicate or work with them if you can't? If you're forced to sort of write text
No,
messages back and forth in this controlled platform.
it feels, the phrase slave labor comes to mind for me. It feels a little bit like slave labor, a little bit like you're in the gulag, and you're being forced to work a certain way. There's something inherently, well, obviously there's something inherently distrustful. And I guess what you're saying is, by going to a subscription model, you kind of take that off the table. But I suppose there is the risk that one of your freelancers or a freelancer on Revolancer will say, "I'm going to contact my client directly." Now, let me play this out just out loud. So the freelancer contacts me directly, and cuts you out of the equation. First question would be, are you okay with that?
Absolutely. We're there to
You
facilitate
want that.
connections, not control and sort of be a third party to that relationship forever.
So now looking at that same example, if I'm a freelancer and or rather somebody comes to me, a freelancer comes to me, and they come to me directly, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to leave your platform. I mean, if they leave your platform, they're leaving a lot of money on the table potentially for other customers. Is that kind of your thinking?
Exactly. I mean, the freelancers we work with typically work with lots of different clients and frequently have a need to connect with more. And ultimately, if that's not the case, if they only want to find one client on the platform and then leave, well, they're not going to be sort of a paying customer for long then anyway. It's just not the right fit, which is fine because there are plenty of people for whom we are absolutely the right fit.
Yeah. So the freelancer on Fiverr is incentivized to stay on the platform, to continue to get the 75%, to get access to the marketplace, whereas the freelancer on Revolancer has to pay out of pocket, a small sum. In some places, maybe it's even a significant sum, but basically a very small sum, a third of a Netflix subscription. They can stay on the platform, they can have all those advantages, and they can go to a customer directly eventually and say, and make their own deal, right? So you're sort of like a deal making platform, right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And the other thing, if you're looking at it from a business model perspective, if you take Fiverr, who have a market cap in the billions, if you take their annual revenue and you divide it by the number of freelancers on their platform, and then if you were to suppose that they all pay monthly, it would be about $5 a month per user. So it lines up.
It would. So what does their revenue look like, Carl, at
Fiverr,
Fiverr? Do you know?
I believe
Yeah.
I think this is for 2021, but about 300 million USD or so.
Okay. So, not insignificant. And who are the other competitors in this space from your perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, Fiverr's direct competitors are people like Upwork, Freelancer.com, people per hour. And then there are a few more, but those are the sort of significant ones.
Yeah. So if you put them all together, would it be like a $500 million industry, or would it be a little bit bigger?
Oh, a lot more. It's a few $1 billion and growing quite quickly too. Just the freelance market space.
Okay.
Um, but also, quite interestingly, McKinsey predicts that by 2027, more than half of the US workforce will be freelancers. And that's
Well,
2027, so that's not far away.
half. Yeah, and the hybridization of work sort of plays into this. Um, and um, so there's sort of two sides to this. This philosophically, one is that there are good things about the gig economy. It's not all bad, but there are really bad things about it, and it's a little bit of a different situation. But if you think about what's happening in Hollywood with the writers' strike, which I know a little bit about as a writer, you will see what's happening is before they would have it. It was kind of a gig economy, but they'd get hired for the whole year and they'd write 23 episodes of television.
Mhm.
Now they're getting hired into the so-called mini room, and they're writing 6 to 8 episodes of television. And sometimes they're not even doing that. They're like just kind of sketching out the season in a mini room and
Mhm.
getting paid a minimal amount and not being allowed to participate in the production. So, not learning how to run a show, not learning any of that. So, there are these negatives to the gig economy. The positives are that some people like to work that way and that there's definitely more flexibility and freedom. So, in your, I think so much of business is the business model. Do you have a business model that works? So, let me ask you about growth and team. So let's start with team. Who is Revolancer right now besides you?
Well,
Besides your 23-year-old self.
yeah. Well,
Go ahead.
we're a team of eight. Right now, sort of eight in the core team, and then we've got a few great advisors as well who we work with on a regular basis. Yeah, so quite a small team for now, but growing along with the platform.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And is everybody in Wales, or are you spread out?
We're mostly in the UK, with a couple of people in Wales. Yeah.
Okay, so what is the next? We're talking in 2023 in basically mid-May. What does the rest of the year look like? Like, where would you like to grow? What's the number
The
if you
sort of
have
the
one?
head count.
Well,
Well,
both head count and then user count
yeah. So
and
we're aiming to
customer
get
count.
to a
Yeah.
we're aiming to get to about 100,000 users by the end of the year. In terms of head count, I think it's hard to say. I do think that to some degree, head count, if it's lower, is actually better. If you can sort of operate well.
Mhm.
We are raising a seed round towards the end of this year, so depending on what side of the year end it closes on, essentially, we could be looking. I'd estimate maybe, let's say we close this side of the year, probably about 20 people or so by the end of the year, if I had to give a loose estimate. But it's really going to depend on a number of factors.
And how did you raise, and how much money did you raise initially to do this?
Yeah, so we've raised, in USD, probably about 700,000 USD or so to date. Pretty much all at the pre-seed stage. We're going for a larger seed round now, later this year. And yeah, and we've had a mixture of sort of VC backing and then also really credible angels like the former captain of the South African rugby team.
Now that's an angel. That's
Yes.
probably somebody you don't want to mess with. I'm thinking.
No, probably not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, that's exciting. So, what geographically? So, how do you get customers? How do you get freelancers? And then, how do you get businesses? How do you raise the awareness of this? I guess I'm asking really, how do you market this, and what's your customer acquisition cost?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, ultimately, at its core, the one thing that we really focus on is building a platform that freelancers love so much that they will tell other freelancers about it. And then everything else we do, so we have a number of different sort of paid marketing campaigns and organic campaigns and so on, but everything, is just kind of fueling that core
Mm,
flywheel, of just building a platform that people
yeah.
want to share and talk to other people about. So that's the number one thing that we care about and really focus on. And that means that our customer acquisition cost is actually very low. So that's
Mm,
in fact, I don't want to say the exact number, but in my when we did our pre-seed sort of financial forecast, where we secured a VC backing for pre-seed, I estimated that freelance acquisition would cost a certain number. I was told that I was being far too optimistic with that, but in reality, it's a quarter of that now consistently over more than a year.
and is that because they like the platform, as you suggest? Is there
It's
any other
because
reason?
yeah, it's essentially we're very very well aligned with what freelancers want, and freelancers tend to talk to other
Mm,
freelancers and then share it. So ultimately, our actual cost
yeah.
per user acquisition is very low.
So I think there's an important lesson here, and I just want to underline it, and that is the way the system works today is, to be honest with you, I've used Fiverr a number of times. I'm actually using Fiverr right now for something, for an audiobook. But but and I would say that in all honesty, for me, it works pretty well. It's inexpensive. Like, I'm getting an audiobook done by someone who seems very experienced. And I don't know, for a price that's, I'll even tell you what the price is. $250 seems like ridiculously low. Now it's really a 40-page story, so it's not a whole novel or anything. But to me, that just seems so low. And he's doing sound effects. He's going to do sound effects too. So it's low. Um, and I feel somewhat guilty about that, and I probably will show my guilt in giving him a bonus of some kind. But it's pretty doable. Now on the freelancer side, it just seems wretched. It just seems awful. And the lesson I want to underline here, and I want to leave you with the last word on this, is this is what I really like about what you're doing is you're very dedicated to your customer, the freelancer. You are really focused on what they want, and you're listening to them. So what else do you have to do to make this a success, Carl?
Well, I mean, ultimately, as any two-sided marketplace, you kind of have to pick one side to prioritize and to favor. And large freelancing platforms, all the large platforms have chosen the client. And to prioritize the client, and their rationale for that is, well, it's easier to get freelancers than clients because freelancers want something. Obviously, like both the freelancer and you, the
It's a
platform, want
chicken
something
and
from the
egg. Yeah.
client.
Yep.
Um, but if you start digging a bit more, it starts to actually really fall apart. Because ultimately, comes back to what I said before, sort of with the commission fees, with interrupting people's workflow, and actually, um, if you take a site like Rightmove, they are the best and largest sort of website for prospective home buyers, exactly because they didn't prioritize home buyers, right? Because home buyers aren't looking for the best platform experience. Obviously, that would be nice, but ultimately, home buyers are looking for sort of a good selection of homes, that they might be able to buy. And Rightmove were the first in their market to really prioritize real estate agents, and that way they got the most high quality listings, and that's what the home buyer is looking for.
Mm.
And just in the same way, our philosophy is that by prioritizing the freelancers, we are nurturing the supply and actually then giving businesses the best possible supply and the best possible outcome. So that's really our kind of philosophy here. It's something I'm very passionate about, have been for a long time. It's an industry I understand well. Yeah, I'm just super excited
Yeah.
for the next steps.
Karl Swanepoel is the CEO and founder of Revolancer at revolancer.com, a site for freelancers that puts freelancers first. I'm Michael Conniff, the host of the Accelerator. You've been listening here on one of the many podcast platforms we're available on. That's Spotify and YouTube for video, Spotify for audio as well, and then all of the rest, Apple, Audible, Amazon. There are too many to count, too many to list, but you can find us in all of those. Please rate us, rank us, subscribe to us, and share this. Share this aggressively, as a chef friend of mine used to talk about. How do you season food? Aggressively. Do it aggressively. Do it a lot. And Karl, I want to thank you. You've been a terrific guest, and it's a compelling argument. And you definitely say it well, and because you're kind of from the UK, you sound smart when you open your mouth. So you had us at hello. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And I want to thank all of you for listening. And remember, keep watch for the Accelerator and the Angel, because we'll be back with another podcast before you know it.